Goldsmith came with us, and I'm in the back of the car. You know, Rob gets the place up, shotgun.
Speak right into the microphone.
Okay, and Rob says, "So Natalie, how are you doing on Manny time?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, they have a name for what I've been experiencing?" And I'm like, "I think we might have to work on it." And you know, I thought I was done that with my mother, having to tell someone to pick you up like half an hour earlier than really had to go. So anyway, Walker's a touch of it. Walker does. So, all right, so we're all here to celebrate, okay? We're all here to celebrate Manny's life. Please be prepared to laugh. He was all about laughter. He would have wanted lots of the big three at this party, and I hope I don't need to spell it out for you, but rock and roll is all we're offering today. So, fellow musicians, here we go. Okay. Here we go. So, anyone have lighters they want to pay in tribute? Mine's in my purse. All right, hold your thumb up. Manny was all about rock and roll. So, I've lived with Alzheimer's and ALS, and I can tell you Manny had courage. And so he would have loved to party like this. When I take these guys to their first con, I'll tell you, Manny had courage. He and I discussed a Butch and Sundance exit or a Thelma and Louise, but he wanted to keep on loving his boys. As a confirmed bachelor when we met, which there's some really funny stories about his sock bouquets, which I could tell you. He played hard at sports, girls, and fun. He surprised himself at how much he loved being a father. The best, he would say. The best. It was great. He loved it. So this party is to remember Manny as he was. Fun, young, and as I look through the pictures, very hot. I want to thank Beth Greenblatt, Melinda Schultz, Susan Sama, Cindy McCarthy on my team, and Skip and Ann Pardee and Rob and Adele Goldsmith for helping me to pull this shindig together. Manny was best man and MC for countless events, but here's his good friend Skip to carry out the rest of the show.
Maybe I should put my tremendous friends throughout his whole life. Manny made friends that became friends of friends, and I'm one of those. And I am so proud to become a person that can consider themselves close to Manny. But in this room right now, there are tons of close friends of Manny, and that's the gift that Manny began. Every one of us feel like if they knew Manny, they had a special relationship with Manny. And obviously, by everybody being here, I bet every single face in the audience, and even if you've never met Manny before until today in a picture or a story or whatever, you're going to walk out of here and feel like you knew him. One of Manny's oldest friends from grade school, one of his longest, most loyal friends, I'm going to introduce next is Robert Goldsmith, Dr. Robert Goldsmith.
Thank you. Since I go first, I'm the one who gets to say, Manny's late again. The last couple weeks I've had a chance to speak with a bunch of you and a bunch of my friends, and the same two comments or questions keep coming up again and again, and I've worked hard to figure out what it means and what to say. It's getting a little clearer. The first one is over and over and over again. And you could take the rest of the keys out of the piano, she wouldn't have missed it. And Betty might not like you, and that was okay. But if she did like you, and she knew you were coming over, she would whip up a batch of chocolate-covered prunes. Just to say hello. And she wasn't an easy woman to be around and to grow up around. There were fights and yelling and screaming, and she was crazy. So, feel free as we're gathered around in the future to say to me, Manny's in a better place. I'll respond, you never met Betty. The harder one, and the one I've really been groping with myself is, how the hell could Manny be gone? How could a guy who was so full of life, who would run marathons on a whim, who would stay up for days at a time, who could fall asleep standing up, who would spend overnights doing horrible things on commercial radio, who would ride a one-speed bike from Trenton to North Jersey just for the hell of it. And you know the rest of the stories. How could he be gone? And having seen him over the last couple of months, the physical part, the absolute unfair good looks, the natural athleticism, the voice, I saw those wither, and I can kind of deal with that. But what's harder to deal with is the energy. I feel like the sun's gone out, and I feel cold and alone and a little bit scared. And I've tried to figure out, how could Manny be gone, and what do we do now? Well, last night we were together at Natalie's with a bunch of the old guys, and I'm sorry to use the term old, but the old guys. And over time, it started to come together a little bit. You can't recreate the sun. It can't be done. But we collectively can build a big bonfire that at least will keep us warm and light and keep Manny's memory alive. So I can speak for myself, but I would love for you to join me, to make the most of what God gave us physically. Our physical talents, our muscles, our voices, our passions, our interests, to make the most of it because it's fleeting. And because it honors Manny and it makes Manny a little more alive. The second thing is, I'm asking you guys to join me. Let's be a little bit crazy. Let's wake up hungover every now and then. Let's drive just a little too fast, take turns that are a little hairy on our bikes. Let's be innovative. Let's not just walk in step with everyone else. Let's be different. Let's be creative. And in that way, we can keep a lot of the energy that Manny had, and we can keep that spark and keep Manny alive. And last, but maybe most important, let's be kind. Let's be kind even when it's not expected. Manny was a guy who picked up hitchhikers when picking up hitchhikers was no longer a safe thing to do. Manny was a guy who was generous in spirit and in money to a fault. He didn't care about himself. He cared about everyone else. And the people that he impacted weren't even necessarily people he knew. If we can collectively use the most of what God gave us, if we can try just a little bit and not too over the edge, to be just a little bit crazy, and if we can work hard on being kind to others, well, we won't recreate the sun, but we'll be together and we'll be warm and there'll be light. Manny will live on in our spirits and we just might be okay.
Morris, Manny's father, was his younger brother, and Louise has been a dear friend to all of us for many years. And Manny was very, very, very close to his aunt and uncle.
Hi. I was going to introduce myself. He's already done it.
Speak right in.
Yeah, okay. I first got to know Manny when he spent the summer with us in 1975. He was just out of high school. And Saul and I had been married just over a year and just moved into our new home. And I was slowly being introduced to the Glin family. Glinkevich is where it came from originally. The father and my husband were survivors of the Holocaust. And I had met both Morris and his father and Yeshua, his uncle, who lives in Israel now, on our honeymoon. And Manny was instantly a favorite relative. I'm reading from a paper because I'm not very good at off the cuff. He had the same gentle, warm, kind, caring nature of the whole special family I'd married into, and we loved him dearly. We all loved him. Over the years, Manny was very much present in our lives, which is kind of amazing given the distance between our homes, but it didn't seem to matter how far we were apart. Physically, he was always there and always connected, always up to date with what was happening in our lives and his life. He had the gift of the gab, we all know that. Always had something to say about almost everything. His observations were usually funny, sometimes penetrating, mostly lengthy, and never hurtful. He always found the humor in every situation and often created the situation for you to find the humor. He would often write long dissertations on something or on a situation that he'd happened to witness, or he'd give advice on a situation and then he'd mail them to us. He always gave the gift of a smile. I've left some of these writings over there. I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know if Dylan and Walker have read them, but I leave them with them. And, they can enjoy them later on. For years, Manny managed to dodge all the Calgary and New Jersey yentas, that's the matchmakers, attempts to marry him off, and there were many. I mean, every time he came to Calgary, they were almost standing in line wanting to give him a daughter, a niece, a nice girl that they knew. And he always said, well, he was too full of nonsense to ever be marriage material. But Aunt Natalie, you married him with all his nonsense and gave him a life that he never believed he could have. He was always in disbelief. He loved you, even though he called you an animal. He used to say, Natalie's an animal. Dylan and Walker. You made him so proud. You were everything to him. He kept you up to date with your activities and achievements with such pride. The Glin family has a huge hole, and it's full of wonderful memories. I hope we can be together often and share these memories and make new ones. We want to stay connected and share in your lives. Manny wanted that also.
Just add a couple of stories that stick in my mind of Manny and things that I always remember. There was one summer we were moving houses. He flew out for a couple of weeks and spent most of his time helping us pack. Interesting letting Manny label boxes when you're packing. You never know what you're going to find. I remember coming back into our storage room once we had moved, and he had long since come back to New Jersey at the time. going through the storage room looking for something and finding a box labeled with the Lost Watergate tapes that I wasn't aware had made their way to Canada. Yes, there was another one, yeah, Meatloaf from 1973 or something. But yeah, it was a gift that kept on giving. Every time we went looking for something, we found a box labeled with all sorts of other things. Yeah, we got some interesting looks from the movers as they were moving these things around as well. The other story, again, goes back to him having to dodge all these attempts at being set up, even when he was in Calgary. I remember one, a friend of ours had set him up on this date, had arranged everything, and so finally he had agreed to go out and pick this girl up. Mom had offered him her wonderful Oldsmobile, and he said, no, it's okay, I'll take Danny's car. 1985 Mercury Lynx, about 15 years old. My little red hatchback, which he called the Chick Magnet, ironically. So he drives up there in this little old beater to pick up this girl at her parents' place, I believe it was. A really nice house in a nice neighborhood. Comes to the door, she takes one look at the car and sort of does a double take. And then he reaches for the keys, which of course have my Mighty Morphin Power Rangers keychain on them. She takes one look at those and the date's over. So Manny had these ways of getting out of these things if he didn't want to do them. Those are sort of my two favorite stories. I'll just leave you with one thought that Manny left with me a couple times, and that is a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants.
Impacting people in his own subtle way. He was the master. He was the master of voice, but he was also a great listener. The next guest speaker we would like to introduce. You know, in life, we all hope that we have someplace to go and that we're going to go after this wonderful experience. Hopefully it's wonderful. We're lucky enough. Maybe not so wonderful for a lot of people. But one thing that I do believe in is angels. And while we're on earth, there's a few instances in our lives that you wonder why there's an angel. And whether or not it's the P-51s that flew over our troops in Berlin and Germany, or if it's somebody that you know special. But I'd like to introduce an angel in my book. He became one of Manny's great friends. She became one of Manny's great friends, an absolute close friend to Natalie, and an angel in my mind. Cindy McCarthy.
A friend of Natalie and Manny's for 12 years, since Dylan was about 3 months old. And it's all because of 1, the Grateful Dead, 2, motorcycles, and 3, Aspen. I'll start at the beginning. Manny used to walk his puppy Aspen at a local park near their home in Jamaica Plain, where he met another dog owner, and they would talk as the dogs played. She tells Manny about a motorcycle group she rides with called the Babes, and suggested he bring his wife to meet us and ride. So he did. Natalie became part of our group. Fast forward a few years, Natalie and I have taken many trips together, and often around her birthday. This is one of my fun memories. One time we were taking off for a trip at something like 7:30 in the morning, and I went to their house. Manny was up and helping send Natalie off for a week. It was her 50th birthday. Wake the boys up, let's sing happy birthday, and eat cake before we go. This was a fun memory, chocolate cake for breakfast. Remember that, kids? On to more recent times. As Manny became less able-bodied with ALS, he and Natalie realized they needed help. Manny said, "We need a nanny." I said, "I'm yours." That's how I became Manny's nanny. In the 9 months following, we formed a great team of caregivers and helping hands, enabling life to continue as close to normal as possible. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to die too. I'm thankful for all the people involved in the care of the family. One of my tasks in helping Manny was to organize his photos and writings with him. Oh, wow. This is when I began to know what all his old friends already knew about this guy, and I got a glimpse into the workings and the background of this man. Funny. Organizing his life's photos, they say, every picture tells a story. Well, Manny told a story for every picture. And yes, you can be afraid. His writings were very funny. Job applications he sent were my favorite. Here's a bit of the one he wrote to the Howard Stern show. Now, his father lived in New Jersey. Manny had already moved up to the Northeast. And his father was always trying to get him to get a job back down in New York or New Jersey. So his dad called and said that he saw an advertisement for the Howard Stern show, writer-producer, in the New York Times. Well, Manny thought that was a bunch of fluff, and he wrote this condensed version of this consideration for the job. To Gary Delabate, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it right, at WXRK in New York. Regarding that New York Times ad for associate producer writer, I'd like to submit my candidacy. The following are significant experiences and accomplishments that I feel make me ideal for this position. I am a most dynamic figure. I have been known to redesign railroad stations, making them more efficient in the area of heat retention. I am proficient with stucco and cookie dough. And I have been known to tread water for days at a time. I woo women with my sensuous and godlike karaoke performances, and this one's my favorite, and am able to bake 30-minute brownies in 20 minutes. I'm an expert and veteran of love and an outlaw in Peru. I am unaffected by the harmful rays of kryptonite and was a contributing member of the Warren Commission, or so we would have the public believe. I have been caller number 9. I have my own personalized line of corduroy evening wear. I do not perspire. This is a job application. I sleep once a week, usually for a week at a time. The laws of physics do not apply to me. I balance, I weave, I dodge, I frolic, and all my bills are paid. I have played Hamlet, played Yahtzee, and have spoken with Elvis. I have yet to attend college. I am prepared to interview for this position and can be reached at blah, 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 blah. You will most likely have to leave a message. As you can see, I am quite active. Sincerely, Manny Glin. You know Howard Stern had to read that job application, but Manny declined it in the end. Manny loved his business and radio and had especially good stories about his time working in New York and at the river with Schoolgirl and all of that part of his life. Most of all, he was a family man. We would drive to scope out some local ball fields that the kids would be having a game in soon, being sure he could park and have access to the seating area. He didn't want to miss a game that either of the boys played or a concert they performed in. He lived for these things. Sometimes we would drive out to a dog park or go for an ice cream with the boys. Manny pointed out Babe Ruth's house and other historic sites wherever we went. He was interested and interesting. One musing was that he missed running with Aspen, autumn leaves falling, and a pair of jeans that fits just right. Once as we were driving, he made a joke, and I didn't understand what he had said, and I asked him, "What?" And he said, "Oh, damn, my comedic timing is off." I said, "No, your timing was perfect. Your speech is off." More recently, Manny was visited by friends, and one couple ended their visit with a prayer which included the words, "Make Manny whole again and fully restored, blah, 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 amen." It was a beautiful, uplifting prayer, but later Manny commented, "I've never heard of anyone getting over ALS." Well, he did have a remarkable plateau for the following 2 weeks. Thank you, Rink and Wendy, for your faith. Another time, Manny said to me, not to be a sore loser, but I don't like where this is going. Things began a more rapid decline in communication. Manny asked me to be with him when friends visited to translate for him. It was my pleasure. He had lots of friends, and he loved every one of your company coming and visiting with him. When hospice began, Alita and the team from Parmenter Care of Sudbury was the best thing to happen for us all. Their support and professional care allowed Manny the modesty and dignity he was accustomed to. You may notice the whip and cuffs on Manny's bedside medicine box on the rock and roll and biker table over there. There is a story there. Perhaps you would like to hear it? A week before he passed, Manny fell 3 times in a 24-hour period. Early one Sunday morning, Natalie texted her dilemma. His determination to get around on his own and the inability to actually do it were proving too much. It was time for him to stay in bed. I texted Elita, the nurse, saying, "You bring the ropes and chains, and I'll bring the whip and cuffs." Our intent was to keep Manny at home, which is what he wanted, not to have him fall, get hurt, and end up in a facility. I showed up about 7 o'clock that morning with my cuffs and whip. I walked in, sat down, and said, "Manny, if you don't stay in bed until someone can help you, then we'll chain you to it." He smiled broadly and pretty much obeyed. He got a kick out of my method. Go figure. Then came Ron. Where's Ron? Oh. Then came Ron, the epitome of compassionate care, well-versed in the disease ALS. Ron brought comfort and a clarity of understanding the end game. Manny asked Ron to tell him the conversation once again. How does this dance go from here? Ron gave concise, no-frills scenarios. This, that, and then. The dance would be over. Manny was comforted to hear Ron's words in real time. In the end, I'm truly grateful to have been part of this life and death experience. Natalie, Dylan, Walker, Aspen, and the 2 Calicos were with Manny his last night. There was so much love in that room, it'll be a high threshold to find in a person's life. More love and presence than that one peaceful evening in what had been the birthing room of their home. Thank you to my husband and family, too. I couldn't have been there for Manny and Natalie without your support. As Jerry Garcia would sing, nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile. Manny had the most radiant smile ever smiled. Thank you.
Forget that. Reject their rejection and tell them you're taking the job. And he did. He sent them a letter basically saying he rejected their rejection and he was going to start in 2 weeks. And he's like, they never got back to me. And I actually worked there after, and I met Ruth Seymour, who was the recipient of that letter. She had no sense of humor, and I was like, you didn't miss much. So when I talked to Natalie, she asked me to speak, and I was so honored. And she was telling me, talk about radio and some of your funny stories. And like when you're in radio, they're all just stories. I guess they're funny, but they're just stories. But I don't really think of Manny, the chief, as a radio person. He was just a really kind person. Like, the first thing I think of is like all the stuff he did for the kids in Rockport, and when he worked as an admissions counselor, and then he's like Natalie's husband and Dylan and Walker's dad, and he's just so nice. But I'm here to talk about his time in radio. I didn't know him when he was at DHA or MJI, but he moved to Boston, and the river had just gone on the air, and he had heard Martha and the Muffins echo Beach, and he was like, I gotta work at that station because it's so cool. So he sent in an air check tape, and Joanne, who's here, she hired him, and he did nights, and I did overnights, so I used to see him fairly often. So some of the funny stories, we used to have a guy who would call in every night and request Devo. And it just every night he would do it. And finally, after about a year, Manny said to him, like, have you considered purchasing any Devo records? And the guy was like, no, which was just odd. But probably our favorite listeners were Market Basket Bandit. It's one of the guys who called in was the Market Basket Bandit. His name was Ian, and they used to call us from the prison every night. They loved Steely Dan, Echo and the Bunnymen. They would make us stuff in arts and crafts. Like I have like a floral arrangement from one of them. And when they got out, they actually came to a river event to introduce themselves, and they were perfectly well behaved and very polite. So thinking about Cola, but probably the best thing about working with Manny, we did a crossover, and we were talking about Halloween costumes, and somehow I became the schoolgirl, and he became the fire chief, and we just started calling each other that, and a lot of other people did too, and to this day, people still call me the schoolgirl, and I think people still call him the chief. And working with him was probably one of the easiest things I ever did. The easiest breaks I ever had were, crossing over with him on the air. So it probably, goes without saying that the hardest break I had ever done in my entire career was with him too, when I had to talk about him passing. Just listeners still miss him, and they will probably always miss him. And Manny, there's two types of radio people. There's like people who just love to hear themselves talk. And then there's the people who are like total audiophiles and really love music. And Manny was definitely the latter. And I think we all know that the Beatles were his absolute favorite band. So while I was thinking about what I was going to do, I had this particular song in my head. And it's actually like a great description of being a radio DJ. So I'll leave you with this. Words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither wildly as they slip away across the universe. Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my opened mind. Sounds of laughter, shades of life are ringing through my opened ears, inciting and inviting me. Limitless, undying love which shines around me like a million suns. It calls me on and on across the universe. And it is my hope for everyone here that we all feel Manny's limitless, undying love shining around us like a million suns on and on across the universe.
Yeah, but he was a great DJ. Is a friend of the family because he is involved with the Compassionate Care ALS. And I met Ron when we were visiting Manny quite often in the last 3 or 4 months, and at the house. And Ron is a wonderful, special gentleman. And I'd like to invite up Ron Hoffman to give his memories. Manny never was. Our next speaker is a friend of the family, and also somebody that Manny had a relationship with at the YMAC in Boston. Manny was YMCA. Right. Manny was an incredible physical specimen. He worked out like crazy. And not only was he a great follower of music, but he really was a great follower of taking care of himself. And because of that, we got to have Manny longer in our lives, because he did take care of himself. I don't know why I just said that, but I just wanted to put that out. I would like to welcome Hal Gabriel as our next special guest speaker.
Age. I am of a certain age, and I've certainly looked over the whole crowd, and there might be a couple of a certain age. And if you are, in the 60s, there was a comic. He's still around. His name is Jackie Mason. Now, Jackie Mason was on the Ed Sullivan Show in the 60s, but he had the unfortunate timing of following the act, first in the country, of the Beatles. So he came on after the Beatles, and they just wouldn't let him do his monologue. And it was a tough act to follow. So Ed Sullivan said, cue the band, get him off the stage. Jackie Mason said, no. Ed Sullivan thought Jackie was giving him the finger, which he wasn't. So we have him blackballed for decades. I only say that because following these speakers, I feel like Jackie Mason. With your permission, I'll get on with it. This ain't easy. He was so articulate, he was intelligent, he was charismatic, he was drop-dead gorgeous, handsome. One of the things I remember so vividly
is we had so many lunches at Bertucci's on the VFW Parkway in West Roxbury. And a few times, Manny would pull into the parking lot on his Harley, on the motorcycle. Wow, what a sight. He looked like Brad Pitt in the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Man, oh, wow. He was so positive, so upbeat. I used to tease him with affection that if he was ever in 1912 on the Titanic going down, he would request ice cubes for his drink. You know, I met Manny over 20 years ago in the weight room of the Y downtown. We were both fellow gym rats. And I met him and we chatted and we had a little connection. And at that time, there was a song playing over the speaker in the weight room. And I've always been a movie fan and all that stuff. So I was being cute and I said, Manny, if you can tell me who was singing that song, and the song was featured in a movie now, then, I'll buy you a cup of coffee and a bagel. So without missing a beat, thinking on his feet like a great trial lawyer, he said, well, that's Casey and the Sunshine Boys. And the movie was The Eyes of Laura Mars with Faye Dunaway and Tommy Lee Jones. I said, where the hell did you come from? And that started an incredible relationship over these past over 20 years. He went with me one time to the Boston Marathon cocktail party, and he was so comfortable, looking like he just stepped out of GQ and schmoozing with all the past winners. Another time I recall, we went to the garden together with my wife Elaine and Natalie, and we had great seats for the Rolling Stones concert. In his man cave, he was so proud to show me a seat from the old Yankee Stadium, and might have been his most prized possession was a signature on a napkin or something of Jackie Robinson. A couple of times he would bike with me to Provincetown, or I should say he was my chaperone without any training. I had a hell of a time trying to keep up with him. And of course he ran many marathons, including Boston and New York. And he touched me in such a way that very rarely I've been touched. One time, to be a wise guy at the Y, there was something going on, and someone said that they didn't know about my certain persuasions in certain areas. So the next morning, I was leaving the Y, and Manny calls out, he said, Hal, wait a minute, your blue eyes, they sparkle in the light. Whereupon, I took a towel and hit him on the head with it. I just want to close my remarks as a tribute to Dylan and Walker. About a year ago, I think it might have been their last trip to Florida. So they went to Florida for several days. I was able to take care of Aspen, and everything went well. They came back midnight one night. I had Aspen with me. And I remember Walker taking Manny in the wheelchair and careening him through the airport in the letter C coming back. And Manny got in the car with Natalie, And then Dylan came over to me, and Walker was his understudy. And just off the cuff, Dylan said, you know, I want to thank you so much for picking us up and taking such good care of Aspen. And he shook my hand, almost like a wrestler. And Dylan looked me in the eye. Oh my goodness. Those of us who have children would give years of our life just to see that. And of course I shared that with Natalie and Manny, and needless to say, they were over the moon. So in conclusion, thank you for letting me say a few things. And I do feel through all of this, there's a certain presence of Manny here. And he will always be in our heart. And thank you all for letting me speak.
I'd like to take this opportunity to say that I had many fond memories of Manny. I cannot remember Manny ever being down. He always had a good attitude and an outlook on life. I would like to share only a few of my memories, and I have so many of them. Even though he came across as someone who you wouldn't take advice from, he taught me many lessons on life. And to this day, I follow, and I hope everybody here will follow with them. I would like to share some of them with you. He proved to me, if there is something you want to do, you will find time. I remember him coming home late one night after one of his binges outside, and he was putting his running gear on. I said, what are you doing? It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, I didn't run today. And he's running. There are many times I don't feel like doing things I should. And I look back and think about Manny's advice, and I try to find as much time as I can to do something if I really want to do it. He taught me not to take things so serious, not all as important as they seem. We had a bowling team that he was on. We were horrible. We were always in last place, but we had a good time. We were bowling against the top team, which included the president of the league. One of our team members informed Manny, we're going against the top team, which includes the president, and they are very serious. Please be on your best behavior. That is all he had to say to Manny. Next thing you do, you look over and Manny had 2 pencils stuffed up his nose. Another lesson I live by, I was looking to buy a car and didn't want to spend much money. He said, buy as much as you can and you will never regret it. You will only regret not doing the most you can do. I don't know if you know, but I gave Manny the title, the world's greatest athlete. He did things the average person could not do. I was in the apartment stretching one day, and to my surprise, Manny comes walking into the apartment. He just drove from Colorado. He was wearing his jeans and work boots. He said he just drove 36 hours straight and asked me, what was I doing? Told him I'm going for a run. He said, okay, I'll go running with you. And he was wearing his jeans and work boots and went running with me. After 36 hours of driving. He would have a party at the Grove. After that party, the house was a mess. We all went to sleep. Or I thought. We woke up in the morning, the house was spotless. He stayed awake all night to clean the apartment. I gave him the name World's Greatest Athlete, not for his skills, but for his mental toughness, to do the best he can. And I hope that's a lesson everybody will get out of this. We haven't kept in touch as much as I wished, but I will be doing something around the house or with somebody, and it seems like I always have a funny story, And it seems like it always involves Manny. I was talking with Steve Babbis the other day, one of his close friends, and we were reminiscing how he handles sleep. I need my sleep. Even though he very rarely slept. He might have slept maybe 2 hours a night. Even though he lived to be 59 years old, the hours he spent as awake is equivalent to the person who lived over 100. I will miss him, and I'm sure whenever I get together with friends of Manny, when we talk about old times, Manny's stories will arise with a smile. He will not be forgotten. He is a man who enjoyed life. Thank you.
A voice of support, kindness, compassion, loyalty, and most of all, friendship, which these traits are clearly laid out in the Boy Scouts of America. He was a friend that, if asked, would drive as long as it took to be by your side, or to bring you to a place of need. A friend that did so many small, kind things to make someone else's day better. A man that would just visit his friend's parents for just a social visit to chat. He was a chatter. Boy, did he love to chat. Or to offer comfort without them knowing it in their time of need. Manny would come home after a long day working at his dad's deli and a big workout at the gym, bringing his favorite food, a pepperoni pie, or what was a pizza. He could eat a whole pizza himself, but he always offered it up to his roommates, who had ample time all day to eat. Then he wanted to finish the day with a chat. This was always a challenge for the rest of us who usually wanted to just get to bed. And we knew a chat with Manny meant staying up and listening to his fantastic stories. And all true and important, and especially today in his history of who he was. But how did we know that was what all these chats meant? But Manny was a wonderful listener as well. He wanted to know how your day was. What did you do? What, if anything, good or bad happened? He was always sincerely listening. Manny always had a special charm of having his own relationship with each and every one of his friends. There's not an old friend here in this room that didn't have their own story or good times to remember when it was just about him or her and Manny. And it was no different for the young kids, our nephews and nieces. Each had their own special relationship with Manny. When Manny passed and I put the word out throughout my family, I got scores of calls and emails from my brothers and sister, nephews and nieces, my children, who are here today, and recalling stories of how Manny's days in their lives affected them. Memories etched forever. To quote my wife and life partner, one of Manny's greatest gifts was he always took children seriously, adults less so. Manny was a king of reason. Okay, I've been doing good today. A king of kindness, a king of setting an example, and especially a king of friendships. He was the king of the corner inside our Pardee farm in Westboro. He was the king of love for his grandparents, his loving parents, his wife and children, and all of us here today, and his extended family and friends. We will miss his chats. We will miss this wonderful man. He was a true gift to all of us.
So I was up, and Manny offered to take me down to his parents' deli. So sure, I went, and it was fun for a little bit. And then Manny was actually behind the counter, and he was making sandwiches. And he was doing all kinds of stuff. And as a 13-year-old, I'm like, oh my God, I'm down here in New Jersey, New York, and now I'm going to be here in a deli all day. So, but that ended quickly, and we went back to the apartment. And then I all of a sudden was blessed with a lot of people in here, I'm sure, remember the movie Ferris Bueller. And so I kind of, would call this my Ferris Bueller day. So Manny, he had this black Camaro Berlinetta, if I'm not mistaken. And so we got in the car, and of course he asked my parents. They were probably elated that I was going to be gone for the day. So Manny took me in when we went into Manhattan, and as a 13-year-old, you can't believe what you're looking at. And we went all over the place. We saw all the sights. We went to Central Park. We had pizza. We went to a movie, and then as the day went on, it's getting later and later and later. And then we're heading out of town, and we're going through a toll booth, and Manny was blaring the music as he loved to do. Oh, by the way, I got to say, when I was 13, I probably looked like I was about 8. And I used to beg everybody to let me steer the car. And so what I would do is I would lean over and I would steer the car while everybody else did the pedals. So as we're going back through the tolls, we've got the music blaring and Billy Idol's White Wedding is on. And if anybody remembers, there's that part where he screams, "It's a nice day for a white wedding." So we have the window down. We're going to give the person the toll the change, and it was this woman, and Manny cranked it up and screamed at the lady, "It's a nice day for a white wedding!" Wow! And we both were singing, and I thought that was the coolest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I know that she was like, "What the hell was that?" So I'm looking at in awe, and then now it's time to go home. It's a full day. I can't believe what's just happened to me this day. And I was a giant hockey fan, and we're going by, and there's the Meadowlands where the Jersey Devils play. And Manny goes, "Want to go to the game?" And it was already about 8 o'clock, so the game started at 7. I was like, "Oh my God!" So we parked the car. Manny scalped tickets. We went in. We had these really crappy seats, and Manny spots these 2 seats down by the glass. He goes, "Let's go." So we sat down there, and we were right up by the glass for almost the whole game. And he bought me stuff. We had popcorn and soda and absolutely everything that a kid would want. He bought me this New Jersey Devils puck, and in fact, I think I actually still have it. So we had a blast, and imagine, I can't believe this is even happening. Like, this is a full day since the morning. So now we're getting in the car, and it's time to go back home. He goes, "Hey Jordy," he goes, "Want to go see some hookers?" Do I want to see hookers? I was 13 grew up in Rockport, Massachusetts. I'd only seen my uncle's Playboys. So we drove back into the city. And we went to the mouth of the Lincoln Tunnel, and he slowed right down, kind of even pulled over, and I was like, and I couldn't believe it. There was hookers everywhere, and it's wintertime, and they've got bras and stockings. I'm like, holy shit! This is crazy. So we're beeping the horn and everything, and all of a sudden we go through the tunnel, and I've gone to heaven. And he goes, "Let's go see him again." So we turned the car around, went back through, and then I went right back and saw them again, and I just, I thought I'd win the lottery. So that was pretty much the end of the night. I'm sure it was at that. Now it's about probably 11 or 12 or something, and we got back home, and then I think one of the first things I said to my parents, I told them the whole day, but I was like, we just saw a whole bunch of hookers. So that's I've had a lot of great memories with Manny, but that was one of the greatest days of my life. And I'll say this: when I was a 13-year-old, I was such a late bloomer, and I used to get made fun of because I was so short and all that stuff. And the greatest thing is that Manny hung out with me that entire day, not because he was doing a favor to my parents or to my uncle. I think he really wanted to hang out with me. It was legitimate. He really made me feel like I was his friend, and I was. And I'll never forget that my entire life. And Dylan and Walker, boy, did you hit the lottery with your dad? That man, was he just one of the coolest guys on the planet. He'll be missed. Thank you.
He didn't deserve to have ALS, and he didn't deserve to die. So we will cry through this, but we will also laugh for the memories. And I remember every time that I'd come in to play with Walker or Dylan or whoever was home, he'd always smile at me and wave, and it filled my heart that he had courage and he was kind, and that's all I have to say.
And playing the music, and he was just so enthralled by having music in the house, and we're all playing piano and guitars, and I was practicing my trumpet and all that. And he said, so, I hear you want to go into music. That's like the coolest gig ever, but it's a lot of work, And I said, yeah, I think that's what I want to do. I don't know. I'm like, 11. I don't know. So he says, listen, I'm going to put you to the test. And I didn't know what that test was, but he said every radio announcer has to go through this test. And to be a performer, you have to have this type of diligence where you memorize things and you go through routines and all that, and your diction has to be correct. And to be a performer, you have to audition a lot. So this is my audition for you, Skip Jr. And he goes, you're going to memorize this. And I tried for years. This was our thing. We tried, every time we saw each other, we would try to do this together. And I'm going to have a little help here from my friend Wikipedia, because I just don't trust myself. I know that Manny is looking down right now going, come on, man, you can do it. But this is the radio announcing test that he made me memorize when I was 11. We sat down at the kitchen table together, wrote it out, spoke it, practiced it, and we said it to one another every time we saw each other for the rest of his life. And I know that I'll remember these moments together. So this last one's for you, buddy. 1 hen, 2 ducks, 3 squawking geese, 4 limerick oysters, 5 corpulent porpoises, 6 pairs of Don Alverso's tweezers, 7,000 Macedonian warriors dressed in full battle array, 8 brass monkeys from the ancient sacred crypts of Egypt, 9 apathetic, sympathetic, diabetic old men on roller skates with a marked propensity towards procrastination and sloth, 10 lyrical, spherical, diabolical denizens of the deep who haul stall around corner by the quill, the quay, and the quivia all at the same time.
Love it. I was in Jamaica playing, and we had all of these desks and rows of music. And I remember seeing a CD and being like, I want a CD. And he was like, you can pick any CD that you want. And I was like, I don't even know what music I like and whatnot, but I picked out Francis Dunbury's Tall Blonde Helicopter, which was just some random album that I just saw from this this English guy. But yeah, I remember taking that home, and I bought a CD player, like a Walkman Discman, to listen to. And Father and Son by Cat Stevens, his cover of it was on the album, and it became one of my favorite songs to listen to, this cover. And yeah, I mean, as Jake said, like I just started doing music as well and started just listening to other people's covers and just really being invested in that idea of being able to play my own music. And just some kid from Rockport being able to just play music at home. If Francis Dunnery, this random guy I don't know about from the CD that I just got from Manny, Glin in Jamaica Plain, can do this music, then I'm sure I can too. So he was a fantastic person, but he had such an impact on all of our lives. But even just little details like that was my first CD ever. It's because of Manny, and I'll always remember that. He was an amazing person. So yeah, I love you, man.
I was actually not really into Scouts. I was very straight-laced, and growing up I wasn't into it. But one of my first experiences with my boys, my son Sam, same age as Dylan,
buddy, on a motorcycle, and they go to Zabar's, and just this crazy store, and they pick up. Please tell me if this is you. But they're buying all these knickknacks and whatnot, and his buddy buys a lighter, but it looks like it's a grenade. It looks like a grenade. This is cool. Grenade lighter, cool. They're on their motorcycle, his buddy's on the back, and they're driving back to Jersey, and they're on the highway, and some guy decides he does not like these hippies. I don't like hippies. I don't like these guys on this Harley or whatever. And this guy starts yelling at them. And he's in the car and he's on their right and he's getting really close and he's yelling out the window at them. And they're doing whatever 70 miles an hour down the highway, and there's a guy yelling out his window at them. And the guy kept on trying to actually run them off the road. And man was saying it was terrifying. And the guy would swerve over, and the bike would swerve, and there was these two semis, one in front and one in the back. They figured out what was going on, and they basically closed the gap. The guy in front slowed down, the one in the back sped up to basically keep the gap small enough that the car couldn't hit them on the bike. I mean, he was literally trying to knock them off the bike. And they're just terrified and trying to figure this out and what to do. And they're trying to get this guy away. And Manny, he's driving the bike and he reaches to grab something to throw at this guy, and he pulls something out of the bag and he pulls the grenade and he throws it at the guy. And it goes in the window. Well, the guy swerved off the highway and spun out. And the trucks let him out, and he pulled off. And it was like the next exit. They just, I guess there was a massive accident, and it shut down the whole interstate. All connection between Jersey and New York City was shut down for several hours. They pull up the highway. They get to this gas station. Manny jumps off the bike, and he's like, I can't believe that. And his buddy, who was, I don't know, maybe you know who this was, just fierce-looking guy, couldn't get off the bike because his legs were just frozen to the motorcycle. He was so terrified. And so Manny said, I didn't read a newspaper. I didn't listen to the news for about 2 months for fear that someone would think that I was expressing too much interest in this story. And anyways, he left a good story. And that just makes me laugh every day. And that's what Manny represents me.
It's an old Bill Dilly's. It's a Bill Dilly tune that was on the box set that Manny gave me.